All right. Hey, everybody. It's Bob Zeitlinger here. I'm a senior reporter with Makovsky and Company in New York, and I'm going to be moderating the next panel here at the event. The panel is called The Evolution of Events 2023 and Beyond. And we have an expert panel assembled today. This should be an interesting discussion. It's going to entail the current landscape for events, with an eye toward formats, budgets, and technology, but I'm sure it'll entail more than that. So let me introduce the panelists today. We have Mercedes Hunt, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as well. We have Mercedes Hunt, who is the Director of Energy and Sustainability at Marriott International. Mercedes, if you want to just say a couple words about yourself and your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been working in the event space the majority of my career, in the sustainable event space for about the last 12 years. And I like to think of myself kind of as an academic gone industry. So I have shifted into the space of working in sustainability at Marriott International. That's the majority of my job is not an event. So I do my event stuff more with my volunteer work with organizations. So thank you to have me. This is great. I'm excited.
Great. We have Marley Finnegan, and she's the founder of Purpose, which is an event emissions technology firm. Marley?
Thanks, Bob. My name is Marley Finnegan, and yes, I've been in the industry for over 17 years. I've been on all sides of the vendor side, including catering, venues, event design and decor, and production. And I launched my sustainable event consultancy in 2022 with over 150 hours of certification. And I essentially, with that information, decided to create an event emissions measurement technology, which measures for event-related travel. It's called Purpose Net Zero.
Great. And we have Tyler Davidson. He's Vice President and Chief Content Director for Meetings Today. And he comes, sort of his experience here is from the reporter and journalist side, and being able to comment on the industry. Tyler, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I've been in the industry little more than 30 years, started out covering travel trade part of it with Travel Weekly magazine. And I've been at Meetings Today for the past 23 years. Been through 9/11, the dot-com bust, the real estate bust, and the pandemic. So I've weathered a lot of storms there. You can find Meetings Today at meetingstoday.com. We do even small hosted buyer events. Of course, we have our magazine we do every month with the largest circulation in the meetings industry, about 70,000 US-based planners. So thanks for having me today.
Great. Thank you. And the final panelist is Henry Tran. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Six Connects, which is obviously hosting this webinar, this event. Henry, say a few words about yourself.
Sure. Hey, everyone. This is Henry Tran. Excited to be in this panel and talking to you. I've been in the technology industry for over 25 years, mostly in engineering and product management. Been with Sysconnect for 3 years, and really happy to see how the event industry has evolved in the last 3 years during COVID and now post-COVID. So looking forward to a great conversation with the panelists here.
Thanks, Henry. So we'll sort of jump into it here. So let's start with, before we talk about the evolution of events, we'd like to hear from the panelists, sort of what is your perspective on the current landscape for events? Can each of you, starting with Mercedes, can each of you provide your perspective on events, where they stand today? And you may want to draw sort of some comparisons to during the pandemic and even pre-pandemic. So let me open it up to the group, starting with Mercedes here.
Sure. So it's such an interesting conversation because the landscape is completely different. It's like a completely different industry altogether. Pre-pandemic, I was doing these presentations where I was saying, I'm going to bring sexy back. And by sexy, I mean sustainability. And people would laugh because it was just like this term that I think people were tired of hearing. It was just a buzzword. It had kind of come, it had its heyday and gone. Then something happened during the pandemic where people had to reset. They had to recontemplate their career. They had to contemplate what happened basically in the world. And then when we came back, it was like suddenly like this community of people had been built in this really beautiful way, focused on changing the industry for the better, recognizing that we have to rethink about how we do things, whether it be sustainability and like the people, planet, profit model, or whether that just be like, are we sustaining this organization? Are we doing this like in a sustainable way? Like the hours that we work in this industry, for instance. So I feel very excited about how the industry has really changed and changing, evolving.
Okay, great. Marley, what's your take here?
Yeah, I have a similar take. I think there's a real era of post-pandemic innovation happening. I think planners, vendors, venues have taken the opportunity to reevaluate their operations and implement more forward-thinking initiatives along with revised objectives. But at the same time, I see such a huge shift in vendor side demand. I think that obviously vendors are mostly small to medium-sized businesses, and they're sort of in full reactionary mode in terms of drinking from the fire hose, just with the demand shift so vast. I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the business trends around sustainability, compliance, and inflation, and event industry trends, and not in the way that there's it's an intentional disconnect. I just think it's not slowing down and giving vendors and planners necessarily the time to get caught up on those issues.
Great. And Tyler, you come at it from the reporting point of view, sort of watching the industry and what you're reporting on. How has that changed? Where does that stand now, and how has that changed sort of over the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, going into the pandemic, the industry was really going strong. 2019 is still sort of the baseline everyone wants to get back to. And I think now we're right up to that and maybe even exceed that sort of business volume. During the pandemic, I mean, it's like the lights went off everywhere. It was just crazy. And I think really, agreeing with Marley and Mercedes, especially, I'm really happy that issues like sustainability and DEI are back and strong, because I think there was a very kind of emergency attitude during the pandemic of just keeping the lights on everywhere and people trying to save their jobs. So I was afraid some of those bigger issues would go away, but they're back and strong. I think the challenges right now are compression with facilities, and labor challenges are still huge, both at facilities and at DMOs and at meeting planning companies, and budget restrictions, and combined with inflation too. So those are sort of the forces aligned against getting back to the 2019 levels.
Great. And Henry, I mean, what's your take here, and maybe answer from the at least partially from the perspective of where events stand today, sort of a hybrid versus in person versus virtual. That's been sort of the one thing that's been, kind of moved and been fluid throughout the, the last couple of years. Be interested to hear your view on where you think the industry stands here.
Yeah. So, before COVID, I travel a lot to events, and almost 100% of them are physical, right? Not only they physical, but the use of technology were very limited. Unless you go to an event at more than 10,000 people, you don't see mobile app. You don't see, any virtual meeting. You don't see meeting scheduling and so on and so forth, right? And all of that changed during COVID. And then, as a light off in a physical venue, the light is on in the virtual world, with everyone adopting virtual events, everyone adopting technology, right? It become a forced crowd. So people have to use it. They have another way. But when they use it, the light bulb came up in their mind, like, wow, it actually worked. The virtual event is virtual technology, the agenda, the meeting scheduling, really convenient. So I think that during COVID and after COVID, just like everyone's saying here, people eager to go back to physical. But when they go back to physical, they realize two things. Number one is that, wait, look like the participation is going down because people, audience, attendee, they need a bigger reason to leave their house. They don't want to leave their house and travel for no reason anymore, right? So they have choices, right? They like to join the event remotely if possible. And then the other thing also changed is that now that people are using the technology, they get used to it. They see the value from it. And now they expect a different level experience for the events. They don't want to go to the event and have to get the piece of paper delivered to them with the agenda to mark what session they're going to anymore. That's no longer acceptable. So that's where we are. And I think with regard to the format that you're asking about, I would say that physical become virtual, but now it's gonna be a combination of physical and virtual. It's gonna be a hybrid format, gonna make a lot more sense. And then the event planner have to think about for these events, for the audience that I want to target, is it physical the best way to do it? Is it virtual the best way to do it, or a combination of both? So there are choices and there are strategy they have to decide.
Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit about, that's the sort of the current landscape here. Let's talk a little bit about what you all expect to happen in the future, be it short term or long term. And maybe Tyler, let me start with you in terms of what you're seeing. What sort of the trends that you expect to pick up in terms of format or technology or budget or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with sort of being amazed at the advance, especially of hybrid meetings. We poll our readers every year, and I didn't expect the response to be 50% of them are doing hybrid or expect to, and 26% are definitely open to the idea. I think after the pandemic period, a lot of people had the quote unquote Zoom fatigue. So I thought that, if people wanted to get back to in-person meetings, understandably, but I think hybrid is here to stay. I agree that when you have a meeting, and I think maybe people might consider having less meetings, but when you do have a meeting, it should all be about forming relationships and networking, the things that you can only do face to face, that we've all seen over the last couple of years. There's some of the benefits and drawbacks to solely virtual meetings. So I think in that in-person environment, definitely, it'll all be about exchanging ideas with colleagues, forming smaller affinity groups. And then, like I said, though, the budgets have to catch up. The staffing has to catch up. Who knows with airline, the airline issues we've been having with price and service, that makes people not want to travel outside of their home. So you need to give them something that makes them want to travel. And I think interaction and experiencing unique aspects of a destination are definitely a couple of the things that will really come more to the fore in the future.
Okay, interesting. So what I'm hearing is, given some budgetary constraints, planners have to really make an effort to draw that attendance and get people out of their offices and out of where they are. Let me ask Marley here, and I know you come at it from a sustainability perspective. What do you see sort of happening, through that lens in the future?
Sure. So short term, I'm seeing sustainability as a trend or as a nice to have, like from a lot of planners in conversation, rather than what the reality is that it's going to be a permanent facet of how we do business in the events industry. I think that responsibility in the short term will fall to vendors and venues to act sustainably, and we'll need to see business models shift to support that. I think we'll see more contractual obligation of this addressed both in RFPs and with contractual verbiage. I think that venues and hotels will have to get really serious about green energy implementation to remain competitive. And frankly, in the long term, I believe that compliance and reporting will go extremely mainstream, and it'll be a regular request to planners, agencies, and venues. Sustainability and DEI, I believe, will be widely understood and recognized for the intersectionality that exists between the two, not as mutually exclusive. The IPCC report has a lot of statistics around sort of basically the most underserved communities are the most highly affected. So sustainability and DEI, really becoming, I hope, very much more of a focus in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And Mercedes, what's your perspective here on, kind of what event planners should be expecting?
Well, since I do so much research, what I can say is if you go into like the booking.com survey that was just published this week, what it's showing is that this is what people want. People not only do they want the sustainability piece and they want to rethink about how they travel and have it be more meaningful, more authentic, but they also want like reward points for it. They want to be like acknowledged for their good choices. Mm-hmm. And that was something that was kind of shocking to me about this particular survey that just came out, about how they specifically want to be rewarded. They want some sort of a point system. So if you think about like gamification and the power that gamification has on this industry, it's incredible what I've seen people do, to get their stamps on a passport as they're at a trade show so that they can get some award at the end. I think that the trends is that we have a toolkit. And if you look at it like this, that we've got this toolbox and that we're pulling out the tools as we need them. We're pulling out hybrid events, we're pulling out completely virtual, and we're pulling out just completely having things live and in person based on the need, based on the audience, based on the goals that we're trying to accomplish, bringing people together to have meaningful connections, but bringing people together with intentionality. And I think that that's becoming so crucial, is that gone are the days where you attend a conference and you're running from one session to another and there's no networking. That used to happen. People always used to complain to me as a planner, there was never enough time for networking. Now, that is a factor because people want to have meaningful connections and they want to connect with the authenticity to the local community and have local food, local experiences. That means something. And that's really cool. That's a huge shift.
Sure. There's more this human, you're saying there's more this human element, and the interactions are just as important as any information that's conveyed throughout the conference.
Probably more so.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So let me jump. We talked about a little bit about sustainability. How important, and let me throw this out to everybody and maybe start with Marley, because this is, her priority in terms of what she does. How important do you think sustainability is when attendees are thinking about conferences, and how much does that create goodwill, and how much should planners be planning around sustainability and making it sort of a part of a visible part of what they're doing when they're putting together events?
Sure. So a big, very big purpose around planning sustainably outside of, compliance and future and strictly around the climate is actually around, generational concerns. So 56% of American population are Gen Z and millennials, and 88% of that cohort, or actually of Gen Z, are extremely focused on working with purpose-driven companies. So from a business perspective, the future consumer is highly concerned about this. And, as Mercedes mentioned, frankly, everyone's intention is to do well by the planet. There is a little bit of a disconnect between sort of the full understanding around concepts like emissions and all the different aspects around, the biggest emissions factors around events. And I think that is something that will continue to evolve and is becoming more simplified by professionals, sustainability professionals. And frankly, I think there's a lot of momentum in the industry around people becoming more educated. I mean, my future hope is that everyone in events is a sustainability expert. I mean, that would be the goal, and that's the way that the direction of, education is going. So yeah, I mean, Gen Z and millennials are a powerhouse from a consumer base to be reckoned with. And so recognizing that both for the sustainability of business is an important concept.
Sure. Let me jump to the poll here, and I'm going to ask Tyler and Henry and Mercedes to weigh in. But while I do that, let me push this out to the audience. Basically, if you can answer this poll while the panelists are talking, basically the question is, how long have you had sustainability efforts and metrics as part of the planning process? And you see the categories there. If you can sort of just take a minute to answer that question. And let me kind of throw it to Tyler in terms of, the importance that you're seeing from the industry with regard to sustainability. And maybe that's in the form of, people urging you to cover certain aspects of sustainable meetings and events.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's definitely hung around from the pre-pandemic days, but I do agree. I think with what Marley was saying, that there's a disconnect. If you talk to someone from Europe, and especially a supplier, it's like you'd think the end days are here with global warming. Their whole community there are really on board with even carbon offsets, things like that. In the U.S., not so much now. I think the big suppliers are on board, but a lot of the planners, I just get the impression they aren't as much yet. I'll reference a site global study for incentive travel planners, and they really asked how important sustainability was to them for their incentive programs. And in Europe, it was in the top 3, and in the U.S. For those planners, I don't even think it was in the top 10, which was shocking to me. But it does make me feel good that, big companies, such as the big hotel companies, the big meetings industry associations, definitely see the importance of it and are behind it. But I think there's just maybe a little bit of a lag from the planner side as compared to Europe at the moment.
So let me push out the results to the audience here, and the panelists can look at this as well. So it looks like more than 2 years. So it seems like a good deal of event planners have been working in the sustainability area here. 83% with only a smaller proportion doing it more recently or thinking about it and putting it into place. Henry, let me ask you a question from the Six Connects point of view. What are you hearing about the importance of sustainability in the solutions, and the requests you're getting from prospects and ongoing clients, current clients?
Yeah, I mean, this poll is very interesting, right? Because this is exactly what we're seeing, right? As a provider of event platform that driving the adoption of sustainability, for the last few years, we constantly seen an increase of RFP and customer inquiries that including sustainability requirements, as much as 200% year over year, right? And look like it get the attention to the customers. And every event planner, when they choose a platform or solution, the first question they ask is, are you going to be able to meet the sustainability requirements? How do you do that? What are the tools? What are the technology? What are the recommendations? What are the practices that are going to drive up sustainability? So we're seeing that. And then, for us, our platform is support both physical and virtual events. And we see a direct one-on-one connection between technology adoption and sustainability. The more technology, the more virtual meeting, the more mobile app uses, the more agenda application, the more virtual meeting scheduling, all of that increase the value that you gain in sustainability. So the more technology adoption, both for physical and virtual events, the higher value in sustainability. And that's what we see.
Great. And that sort of, I would love to give the audience here sort of information they can use. So the next question, and let me kick it off with Mercedes here, is, what can event planners do to really move the needle when it comes to sustainability efforts? Where do they get the biggest bang for their buck?
Well, I think that depends on where you are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, what I'm seeing is throughout the years is that there's quite a lot of education when it comes to just like sustainable events 101. And there's quite a lot of education on the really advanced side of things. Like if you want to go really deep into carbon accounting, that stuff does exist.
Mm-hmm.
Where the lack of education comes is in the middle. And this has been an ongoing challenge. So throughout the pandemic, 2021, 2022, a little bit, I planned these like regular sustainable event meetups. And through this, there were all these questions constantly asked from all different people, everybody from wedding planners to convention planners to venues to the people who are offering solar. It was everybody. And everybody can do their part. And there really are so many different directions you can take this. The initial thing is always take the low-hanging fruit, take those easy wins. If you can, decide on chicken versus a meat that's going to have a heavier carbon footprint, choose that. If you can do a little bit of education where people are choosing to have recycling, do that. Do the easy things first, because those are the no-brainers. Mm-hmm. When you start to ask for it through the RFP and you get more advanced, that's where you can really push the needle. And we've seen so many cool things through technology of reusing cutlery, reusing cups, rethinking about how we use energy, choosing venues that have natural lighting so you don't have to have the electricity on. Little things make huge impacts in this industry, but it does take quite a lot of creativity. And it isn't a one-size-fits-all model. I wish it were, but it's not, because this is a complex system with people involved who have complex needs. And I can give you a perfect example of where sustainability becomes a challenge. I heard from a convention center one time, we save $1 million a day by turning off the air conditioning in the exhibit hall. I was like, that's fantastic. And I talked to the employees and they say, oh my gosh, on the load-in days, they don't turn the air conditioning on and I'm literally dying. I feel like I'm going to have heat stroke.
Yeah.
So is it worth the saving energy and saving money for the well-being of people? Or is it worth the well-being of people? I mean, that's why it's not an easy answer. It's a complex answer, but there's a lot that can be done if you get creative.
Sure. Marley, what's if you want to, take give your perspective here and maybe even point, areas that people think are very fruitful, but aren't as fruitful as they might think, and where they could see the biggest gains.
So I think when I think of an event, and I think when planners think of an event, it's obviously so variable based on the location, all the details, what is the event focus. And so I find it helpful to kind of bucket your emissions factors by, the highest impacts down to, and basically I've established 5, which are common, which anyone that has, sustainability understanding also is clear on, but basically kind of taking these 5 factors and then prioritizing them and breaking down the different elements of the event that fit into each. So the first one is your event related travel, which typically is 70 to 90% of overall business related live event emissions. Next is going to be your energy usage. So that's going to be your hotel, your venue, all the energy associated with that, and your AV. Next is going to be sourcing, food, and then finally waste diversion. So between those 3 things can be a bit variable depending on a lot of different factors. But essentially, if you focus on those 5 areas, then you're going to be really wonderful as far as tackling the biggest areas of emissions around your event. And it also gives you sort of a framework to be able to bucket all the elements into specific categories and really be able to have these important conversations with your vendors around your expectations. Obviously, food, as Mercedes mentioned, your food choices is massive. The locality of your food and as well as donation of your food have massive impacts on your emissions. But ultimately, that travel and the energy portion is going to be, anywhere from 80 to 90% likely of your emissions relative to the event. So if it is a live event, those are the areas of focus. Absolutely. I think just recognizing those and then being able to take action is a huge, tool for any planner to have in their belt.
Oh, great. Appreciate that. That's very useful. Let me, with about 15 minutes or so left here, I want to jump to technology and talk a little bit about, sort of the current state of affairs there. And let me start with Tyler. Sort of what are you hearing? And I'm sure you get a lot of, pitches from different companies saying, we got the latest and greatest technology here. What's your sense at where the technology is and how it's improved and where it's headed in terms of events and making them more efficient, more productive, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all technology, there's always a lot of consolidation going on. So you get these pitches from 50 companies, and then they start combining. One gets bought by another. And, in the end, it's all about creating efficiencies for planners and kind of solving the headaches they may have. So technology such as on-site registration and badges are important. Any technology that really helps create engagement, before, during, and after the event is gold, because then you're collecting that data about the attendees that in turn is valuable to your vendors and sponsors. So those are a couple really big issues. AI is just exploding right now, and it scares a lot of people, maybe rightfully so. I don't know. A lot of people are worried that it's going to take their job, but other people are saying, well, this is one of these things that you need to learn and embrace. And it really makes things like maybe marketing a lot easier, targeting messaging to people on your email list. I just wrote a story about it, and kind of going with the plant forward menu. One of the sources just said, something to the effect of make a plant-based menu for 200 people, and it spit out a whole multi-course dinner. And and then he said, well, and also make it gluten-free, and then it immediately made that sort of change to it. So that's a huge tool that people are just understanding now. The other huge pitfall is if you lean on it too much and you use it for something like contracting, that could create legal problems. So you need to check the results you get very carefully, and not just trust AI to do your job for you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Is there a button that you can press where the Chat GPT actually creates the food and it comes out the other end of the computer?
Well, I know my publisher thinks there's a button I can press to write stories, but that's a whole other story.
So let me throw this over to Henry, because I think there's a lot of planners who say, geez, it's pretty hard to keep up with all the technology. Henry, what's your take on, sort of the event planners and where, how do they navigate the emerging and even existing technology, and what's your advice for them, and sort of what should they be looking out for and be most interested in?
Yeah, I would say first thing first is more event planners need to adopt technology first because I'm still in a huge percentage of event that happen with very limited technology. But for the one that sort of adopting technology and want to do more, Of course, in the last few years, the biggest advancement has been just like everyone here is saying in the area of AI. Right, AI has become an engine that allow company like Cisco creating a way that you can create more meaningful, more fruitful conversation between attendees. We're using AI to create matchmaking between attendees, using not only rule-based engine, but also through AI, looking at the behavior of the attendees and match them together, right? You go to the event, you want to meet somebody, that's great if you meet somebody, but even better, if you meet somebody with the same interest, having the same conversation, have a great conversation, fruitful conversation, right? So we're also using AI to match the attendee with the content. We call it content recommendation, which is a way that bring more value to the event because you deliver the right content to the right audience at the right times, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the event planner, using AI for the idea of create people connection, content connection. The other thing that you can also think about is a little bit of work at the beginning that will give a lot of result at the end. What I really mean is when you're using AI at the beginning, you got to figure out, okay, I got how many target audience that I want to address. Who are they, right? And then you have to take your content and put them into different categories. You got to put tagging on them. You got to create taxonomy. And then you with that work, then AI can come in and match the content and match the people together, right? And at the result at the end, you got better business outcomes, you got better people connection, you got higher satisfaction. And guess what? You also have better data for you to be able to analyze and then create value for your sponsor and your exhibitor through lead generation, so on and so forth. So those are the things that the planners can do. The last thing I do want to mention is that think about content delivery. Think about what content that you want to deliver physical, little less paper and brochure, little more QR code that lead into PDF and video online that they can keep it for a long time. So those are the important things that we need to think about as well.
Sure. And let me push another poll question out to the audience as we continue this discussion. So if the audience participants can take a crack at answering this. The question is sort of at what point during event planning and the event itself, so before and during, do you find technology most useful? And you can see the possible answers there. And let me I guess toss this over to Mercedes and answer the question, sort of the where the technology is headed, but also a question from one of the audience members. Which technology and technological advancement do you think will have the biggest impact on future events or on the future of events?
Oh, well, that's a hard one. I think that there are two different ones that I think for me, in my event background, I would be the most excited about. And one is like the ability for these event technologies. I mean, I've now seen a ton of different demos where, like, for instance, you can create an avatar and then you can move around an event space and you can like then click on a person's picture and then they pop up and then you have a real meeting, and it's so like lifelike and like virtual reality with events really is a possibility. And there's some really cool technology around this, especially with trade shows and being able to like experience things. But then the other side of technology that I find really exciting is how much technology is now popping up around being able to really track all of the pieces of your event. And the sustainability from the DEI stuff, the being able to track emissions, being able to look at your water, your waste, and in your people and volunteers and your engagement, all of these different factors, especially through the gamification piece and apps and being able to really engage people. What's exciting to me is how much of this data can be automated and how much less of it we're having to manually input through time. And I really do think that the more advanced we get with automating the collection of this data, whether it be waste or water or energy, the more we're likely to move forward with this. Because if people are having to manually input it, we know event planners, we're just too busy. Nobody's got time for that, because the event ends and you're on to the next thing, or you're exhausted and you're recovering. And the last thing that you want to do is go through all the surveys or, retrack all your numbers. It's got to be easy. It's got to be just as easy as breathing. And I think technology is going to give us that. And that's what I feel like. That's really excites me.
Okay, great. It's interesting. And so I just pushed out, I think I did. I've just pushed out the results to the audience here. And Marley, if you want to give your take on it, I mean, and we're looking at the results now. Mercedes, your key point is that there's a lot of technology as a measurement tool post-event is vital, just because of that sort of busyness, and you move on and, you sort of take a deep breath and say, okay, it's over. Thank goodness we made it through another event, right?
Even
and
during
this
the
gives
event.
you the opportunity to do that. But go ahead. I'm
Sure.
sorry, Marley. Sort of, you want to provide your perspective here would be great.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is very niche to what I do, but essentially as a sustainable event consultant, I realized that there was no simple way to measure event-related travel emissions, that largest emissions factor. So I created a technology that integrates with event registration software. And basically as guests register, we calculate the exact dollars and cents associated with their carbon footprint. So either the guest can choose to offset or remove carbon relative to that impact, or the event host can choose their own method of impacts. But essentially, we offer a carbon concierge service to help get certified, and also tax deductible if it's carbon removal chosen, to essentially give event sustainability an opportunity within the technology space. So, addressing that largest factor. The calculator we created is different than any other calculator that I'm aware of, in that it meets people at their origin rather than assuming 1,000 people go from Heathrow to O'Hare. So my hope is that it makes a huge impact in the industry and that it enables future, sustainable futures. So thank you for asking.
And maybe this is partially what Mercedes was getting at. It seems overwhelming to track and monitor all these statistics. So it looks like there could be tools and apps for each component that can be integrated, and emissions and determining carbon footprints just on flights alone seems a little overwhelming to a lot of people. Henry, from your point of view, post event, what are the technologies you're seeing and interest from clients and prospects and people from within the industry?
Yeah, I think there's everyone here that talk about the importance of data and analytics is right? Post-event, first thing first, you want to be able to look at the data, measure the business outcomes, and justify for the budget that you have to spend, right, for the event. That's one thing. But post-event, the other thing also important that lacking is how do you engage the attendees beyond the live days? That's not happening, right? You spend all of this money to invite people, to reach out to them, then to get them to the events, and you only get value out 3 days. What happened to the 362 days that you're not engaging them, right? So being able to sort of engage the audience beyond the events, and then also make the content that you created, which costs a lot of money, and put it online, make the content ready for on-demand consumption, also something that event planners should think about and get a lot of values out of it.
Interesting. We have, it looks like we have, I think, about a minute left here. I thought it was a great discussion, and I think it's a discussion that could probably last for another hour. Are there any kind of final thoughts sort of about the evolution of the industry that you want to share? And let me, start with Mercedes, for your final thoughts here.
Just keep doing it, pushing the envelope. That's that's my 2 cents, is we have to continually push the envelope and really think about how we can get more creative around our sustainability in events moving forward. There's so much more that can be done. We're never there. We're always working towards it.
Sure. Great. And Tyler, what do you think?
Well, at first I want to bring up something Henry said about the QR code. I mean, that would died years ago, and now it's like back with a vengeance. And they should have a victory parade for it or something. It's like old technology that is the future, also. But I think meetings are all about collaboration, being together in real time, in real life, or virtually, but really, maximizing your time together. And then to go back also to what Henry said, which is golden, is, once that event is done, you got to keep people engaged. It's like you got them for 3 days and then they disappear off the face of the earth. That just is not a good business plan. So I think, maximize the time that they're together, get them interacting with each other, and then keep them engaged post-event is the future of everything.
Sure. And Marley, just in the 30 seconds we have left here.
So this is really important. So the Biden administration signed protective legislation for food donation in January of this year. And a lot of food providers, whether they be hotels or caterers, for a very long time said that there were not protections and that they had limited, they had liability concerns. And essentially that's all been wiped away. So the most important thing that anyone and everyone can do at this point is begin to operationalize food donation into all of your operations, because there's so many people that need it, and there's huge opportunity within our industry to change that.
Sure, that's a great point. So with that, let me close the session. Thank you, panelists, for all the great insights and contributions. Thank you, audience, for participating. Next up on the list is leveraging immersive experiences that drive leads. With that, I'm going to end the session and thank everybody once again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.